Hey everyone, this is Attorney Andre, and we are in the season of Supreme Court decisions. Hooray, that's great. We've got a lot to talk about, and we've got one case that I want to share with you that is more important than any of them all, really more important than anything, more important than Roe versus Wade, way more important than Roe versus Wade. Because Roe versus Wade, everyone talks about that, like it was overturned and it's just a terrible thing, but all it did is return the decisions, we can call it, back to the states. It didn't outlaw abortion. It didn't do any of that. It just returned it back to the states. And then there are follow-up decisions that made it more accessible, made abortions more accessible in terms of Idaho, I believe. But I want to talk about a case that is way more important than Roe versus Wade because it changes the legal landscape and it changes the way that we do things. Before I talk about that case, stay till the end because it's really important. We're going to talk a lot about this case and what it means for you because this impacts your everyday life. Roe versus Wade doesn't necessarily impact everyone. None of the other decisions necessarily impact everyone, but this one case impacts everything, just everything. Now, here is what this case is. It's Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce. So Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce. And that is a fundamentally important case. Everyone should learn that. And here is why. Because Loper destroyed a 40-year-old precedent in Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council. Now, Chevron at this point is 49 years old. And what did it do? It directed judges to follow guidelines of federal agencies. So you had, for example, the Environmental Protection Agency, you had the SEC, you had a whole bunch of different agencies, and they would make rules. And the judges would say, okay, we're going to follow the rules of these respective agencies. We're not going to interpret them. We're not going to decide if they're fair or not. We're not going to see how they're implementing these rules. And we're not even going to see when these rules change. The federal agency makes rules, and the judges are following those rules. And what you had there was essentially the judges taking a step back and saying that whatever these federal agencies say, that's the law. We're not going to interpret anything. We're not going to follow anything. Whatever these federal agencies said works. And that was really difficult for a lot of people because the regulations changed from state to state. For example, the EPA changed state from state, the SEC state to state, and how they're going to do things. And sometimes they make a rule or they make a law and then they change it in the next week or whenever the next memo is or when the administration changes. And you would have such a difficult time keeping up with these rules or laws, especially in dynamic environments like finance, in environmental regulation, in different things along those lines. And that was Chevron. Chevron was there for 49 years, and it said, look, the judges are not going to challenge it. Whatever the federal agencies say, that's what goes. And here comes Loper. And Loper essentially says, I don't care about your stare decisis. Stare decisis means that courts with the decisions that came before have precedential weight. They have weight. Before, older cases will guide us to new cases, stare decisis. And Chevron turned that on its head. Chevron said that it is not the agencies that are going to make the decisions. The judges are not going to defer to the agencies. The questions, whether they're right or wrong, fair, unfair, the rules will be decided and interpreted by judges. So essentially giving judges way more power. If you didn't like the way our judicial system worked before, you're going to hate it now because the judges are now going to have way more power because they are going to dictate how these rules implemented by the federal agencies are governed. And that means you can have a different interpretation of a rule in Texas than you have in Colorado, than you have in Florida, because you have different federal judges, different federal courts interpreting these federal rules and regulations. Now, you can also have one judge, whoever the judge gets to it first, can affect the whole country. And then that would have to be taken up to the Supreme Court. So essentially, Loper overturns Chevron in giving judges so much power. Now, I always have a problem with this. I had a problem with Chevron as well. I think Chevron was wrongly decided. But I don't think Loper is right as well. Because remember who these judges are. These judges are people. They make mistakes. For example, the Loper decision was a 6-3 decision. So that means 6 judges agreed to overturn Chevron. 3 judges agreed to keep Chevron the same, and they would have ruled differently. So you have the smartest people, the smartest jurists, judges in the nation that make up the Supreme Court, and they can't even agree. But now you're having hundreds of different judges at the state level, at the federal level, all interpreting the various federal agencies and their rules. Instead of giving it to Congress, you're giving it to the judges. And you don't know which judge you're going to get. I mean, there are some judges where, even looking on the news, even turning on the news, you will disagree with them. There are some judges you'll agree with. But you have to understand that even if you like a decision penned by one judge, you might not like the decision penned by another judge. So saying, okay, you know what, we're going to give the judges all of this power. We're going to return it back to the federal judges. We're going to return it back to the state judges, and we're going to take it away from Congress, and we're going to give ourselves more power. So the Supreme Court is giving themselves more power. I think that that's dangerous. I think that Chevron is wrong. Chevron went way too much to one side. Loper is going way too much to the other side. It's not returning the status quo. It's going the other direction. And I think that what's going to happen is you're going to have confusion on how these federal agencies are implemented, and eventually you're going to have mass deregulation, which might in turn actually be a good thing. But you might have mass deregulation, and I think that's what the ultimate goal is to have so much confusion that you have mass deregulation, or Congress is going to have to do some kind of act. Maybe that act is deregulation, maybe that act is something else, but Congress is going to get in the way, because there's no way that you can have a whole bunch of judges make a whole bunch of decisions on interpretation when judges disagree and lawyers disagree with things all of the time. This is huge news because things like this impact you every single day. A lot of people don't really feel the impact of Roe versus Wade, or taking away Roe versus Wade. For example, everyone is going to feel Loper because everyone is going to feel these government regulations. If you don't, think about COVID and the mask mandates and how those were implemented, and how some states enforced them and some states didn't enforce them, and then some judges agreed with them and then some judges didn't agree with them, and what kind of a mess it was where you go on an airplane but you have to wear masks, and then you go somewhere else and you don't have to wear masks, and it got really crazy. Think about that, but now on a scale of every single thing that you're doing, whether it's fishing, because that's regulated by the federal government, whether it's financial institutions, whether it's the issuance of securities, whether it's investments, whether it's real estate, whether it's anything, because real estate is governed in part by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. So you have all of these agencies, the SEC, FINRA, all of these agencies, hundreds of agencies that have all of these rules, and these rules are going to be interpreted not by the agencies, not by Congress, not by anyone except for judges. So if you want to file a lawsuit, you better pray you get a judge that agrees with you, because there's no standard that anyone is really going to look at. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. Do you think that this is the biggest deal in recent history? I think it is. I think this is one of the biggest sleeper cases, and if you don't think it's a big deal, then I'm telling you, this case is going to come to get you, because one of these days there's going to be a regulation. One of these days there's going to be another mask mandate. One of these days someone's going to come up to you and say your fish is too big, your fish is too small, or whatever have you, and then you're going to have to rely on some judge to hopefully decide in your favor. Let me know. I can't wait to hear it. Stay tuned for more. Talk to you later.